everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of Top 8 Podcast. I'm Nikki, and with me is my co host again, Tyler. How's it going, Tyler?
Hey everybody, it is going great. Excited to be here for another fun episode.
Today we have a very special guest with us today, and it is Jinxed. He's here in the video, as you can see. We're really excited to show a VOD and really delve deeper into our topic for this week.
Yeah, well, first of all, how's it going, Jinxed? How are you doing?
Hello. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we had the opportunity to work with Jinx this week, and I thought what would be like a great idea to talk to Jinx about. I actually, part of the reason I thought of this, Jinx, which I don't know if I told you, was that I saw I can't remember if it was the TFT Twitter or like Mort's personal Twitter, but he put out a tweet about like there being more adaptability in set 3, and you responded to that with something about like you needed to find something new to do because you felt like, you know, picking or finding a guide and like forcing a comp was sort of the best way to play, something along those lines.
That was a little bit of a joke because
Right.
I think no matter what, there will always be like the optimal way to play, and it might not necessarily be a patch that's good for forcing, but I think there will always be opportunities for me to put out, you know, a guide that you can follow along.
Mhm.
Right. And so, but I saw that, and then I thought like what would be a cool concept for, especially I think at the end of the current patch, I feel like we're going to talk about forcing comps today, and I feel like at the end of a patch, what a lot of people are doing is you've got less time to like learn a broad set of skills and to like really flesh out the quality of your game, but you've got a brief amount of time, and if you could really learn one comp, force that comp, and like try to hit your sort of peak rating. And so I thought we would put this out, maybe that'd help some people do that. And Jinxed, you've already put out some great guides on like forcing comps, so we thought you'd be good for that. So we've got a game here of me today. I'll be forcing some berserkers, and we're gonna have Jinxed here to talk with us about it. One of the first things we wanted to have Jinx kind of talk about is like, what is forcing, or like what do we mean when we say forcing a comp?
So forcing a comp basically means you're arriving at the same 7 or 8 units every single game. And the one part that's, I guess, a little bit more flexible is in the manner and how you do that. So in the way of how you're arriving at those 7 or 8 units can be, you know, different from game to game, but the end result is always the same.
Right.
And so for you, I'm just curious, like, when you're forcing a comp, do you go into the game, like before the game, are you already playing that comp, or does it depend on some early game variables?
Right. So that depends again on the patch. If I know it's a patch that's good for forcing, then I'll specifically go like on a day or like a 2-day streak where I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to be playing this one build. I've optimized what items I'm going to start with. I've optimized, you know, my transitions. And so, yeah, if I am 100% forcing a build, I fully commit from the very beginning.
Okay, cool. And then from there, we wanted to talk about like what makes a comp good to force or not, basically.
So this is, you know, really interesting, and what I would want to talk about for a bit is, from generally speaking, in all of our experience from set 1 and set 2, when forcing is good is when 2 costs and 3 costs happen to be stronger than 4 cost and 5 cost units. And we've had examples of that both in set 1 and 2. The reason for this is because there's a lot more 2 cost and 3 cost units to support multiple people. So that way, when, you know, maybe 2, 3, 4 people in a lobby are going for the same build, it's okay because there's enough units in the pool to support multiple players. The other case of this, when forcing is good, is if one 4 cost champion is strong enough that it basically stabilizes you to go into the late game. And I think if it's okay, I think I want to use some examples of some builds where this has happened.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for the first example with 2 and 3 costs being strong, I think immediately back to set 1, the Solus comp. So that was all 3 cost units: Vhagar, Lulu, Aatrox, Morgana, Kennen.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you needed, right? And at that part of the the set, that patch, no one was going level 8. Games were being finished at level 7, and no one was picking up 5 cost units. They weren't needed because this comp would destroy everything. And yeah, so it was great, and enough champions in the pool to support everyone. Another example from set 2 is Blender. The only 4 cost unit you need is Janna, right? Otherwise, you're looking at Nocturne, Yasuo, Sivir, Azir. Again, all 3 cost units, enough in the pool to support multiple people. And the really bad one is Void Sin. So that was back in set 1. But again, this one was the worst one because it was 1 cost and 2 costs that you needed. And there were cases where the top 4 players were all playing the same build. Again, it's because there's so many pools, there's so many units in the 1 cost pool to support multiple players. And now for the second example, this is the one where a 4 cost unit is so strong that you only need 1 of it. And I don't mean an upgraded one. I literally mean just 1 4 cost unit. You pick it up and it carries you to the the late game. Biggest example of this is 6 lights, and where you only need basically Yorick with the Guardian Angel. 1 Yorick, Guardian Angel, you can go to level 8. And funnily enough, you have a VOD of this next example. It's Berserkers, where you just need basically the 1 Olaf to stabilize you.
Yeah, hit it on 6 and then just carry your way all the way.
Exactly.
And I think
so that's when I would say forcing is good.
Yeah, to that point, like the recent patch that kind of buffed Olaf felt like it made Berserkers a more forcible build, right? Because Olaf 1 is more likely to get his ult off now and do Olaf stuff, as opposed to like early on where there was some struggle to do that, and you really felt like you had to hit Olaf 2 or it was like bust.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So cool. And then I think one of the last points we wanted to talk about was like, when it comes to forcing a comp, who benefits the most from that? Like, what sort of player?
So this is an excellent question, and you kind of touched up on it. When you don't have a lot of time, you're a newer player, I really, really recommend this to newer players who are just starting to learn the game. And that's because playing 1 build, you're going to learn the game quicker. You'll be able to get comfortable enough with your build that you'll start looking at other things. The best comparison I can make is, let's use League of Legends. When you're starting off the game, it's advised that you're learning 1 champion. Why? Because you learn that champion so well, you start paying attention to the mini-map. You start paying attention to what other units are doing. Same in TFT. You start looking at your fights and seeing what's working in the fights. What's beating you? What are you good against? What items work well? And so, yeah, I feel like you just learn the game quicker. And then from there, as you get more advanced, you can start to play a little bit more flexible.
Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to tack on, Nikki, or any questions that you had about forcing before we got into this?
Do you see it as an issue when there aren't too many carries in the game for set 2? Because I know that was a common problem. And do you think that makes it a bit harder to force as a result of that? Like there's only one direction with Kindred or Azir, like that kind of thing.
Exactly. So that's when it comes down to, the patch. Maybe we have a bad patch when there's, 2 strong carries that blow everything else out of the water, where it's like, I guess I'm playing this or that.
Right.
Yeah. So that's when when a patch is good, you have, more options. Therefore, you don't feel the need that you have to force something. When a patch isn't doing so well, then yeah, you're kind of forced down the same 1 or 2 units.
Like a different path, right? And you can see like types of players who sort of rise through the ranks during that patch as a result, that kind of thing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Cool. So we're going to take a look at VOD of mine. It's a game I played. I went into the game knowing that I was going to force Berserkers, in part because we're doing this, but also Berserkers are like viable to force right now. So we've got that going on. There are some mistakes in the game, as I mentioned earlier. Not the cleanest game I've ever played, but we're going to teach from those. And that's what I was talking about is the guide that I was following to force berserkers this game is a guide that a player called Gunmay put out on Reddit. I'll link to the guide in the video on YouTube here. So going into this first carousel, I'm looking for primarily Chain Vest, but early game I'm looking for Zeke's Herald and Locket. So
right.
those are the two items that Gunmay mentions. They like to have one of each, they said, if possible in the early game. So that's my early game thinking going into this first carousel. So we'll go from there. Let me get to look at this cool load screen. I played this game on my alt account, which is like Diamond 4, so
some pretty good quality games in Diamonds. So.
Yeah, oh yeah. So I missed the Chain Vest, but I take
I
the
see that
belt.
you're going for the Chain Vest there, but then you grab the possible Zeke's component.
Right.
All right, so the game begins.
Yeah, and this is where I first try to throw the game. There was a guy.
Really? Why are you doing so early to throw the
It's
game?
round 1. That's 1-2. I think that's where you're supposed to try to throw.
Go next.
Yeah, no, I guess it's the next round technically, where Mismatched Socks, I think it was, that put out the guide on like what units could
solo
1-3. Yeah, so you'll see I try to play solo Renekton here, but I'm not paying a lot of attention, which I advise against, and we'll see what happens as a result.
So for the newer viewers, what are the champions that can solo this round?
That's a good question. Nasus can solo the round. Renekton can solo the round. Diana with the proper positioning can solo the round. You want Diana to jump to the back left creep, that ranged creep, I believe.
Correct. So Diana always goes in the bottom right corner, regardless of the hex. And those 3 champions can do it without any items.
Right.
And without any hex placements.
So I was just worried by this positioning eventually.
Let me guess, this is your first time doing this?
No, it's not my first time doing it, but I wasn't watching.
I see.
So I throw the belt on there.
Get a little worried at the end.
Don't think it was necessary.
As he's about to heal up.
And then I don't have time to buy both Nasus, which...
So I actually think in these early stages are probably the most macro heavy, like where you have to move stuff fast. Right. So I always try to keep my hands like ready to go, because these are in terms of like focus and how fast you're doing, these 3 stages are probably the fastest.
Yeah, because as soon as you kill it, it just goes into the next round, and then you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, I should not have been tabbed out for portions of this round, and advise that you as a player do not tab out.
Even the early game is very important.
I mean, especially the early game right now.
Yeah.
That changes, I think, a bit with set 3, but just right now you have so many opportunities to make interest gold in the early game.
So Jinx, would you have sold that Kiana there?
Personally, no, because this is mountain map.
Right.
On mountain map, I value Talia and Kiana super highly. Even if I was forcing berserkers, I would use it as a transition.
Right. And even if you were at that 9 gold interval, you would just sacrifice.
I would have bought out the shop. I would have bought out the rest of the shop.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a spot where I may have overvalued interest.
I think it's okay both ways. It might come down to preference at this point.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think there are a lot of things like that. Like that's one of the things that I think is interesting about the idea of forcing, is that even if you know what your end comp is, there are a lot of ways to get there and a lot of decisions to make in the process.
Yeah, so that I like a lot. I really like that, right? Prioritizing the Talia there. You're never going to use LeBlanc in your final build or as a transition unit. Get rid of that, pick up the Talia.
Yeah, you don't even have Woodlands, so it's like...
Right.
And it's kind of a bait sometimes to go Woodlands, when
it can be hard to transition out of them for sure.
Yeah, we've talked a lot.
And then it just falls off.
That.
Yeah. Okay, so you get the Nasus,
I get
and
it.
then sell out.
I like this.
Yeah, I mean, everything I do in the early game here, I'm just really playing to early interest, right? Like,
Exactly. That's the most important thing. If when you're going into the mindset of forcing something, is you want as much gold as possible to roll for the units that you need.
Yeah.
that's my thing.
Especially for something like Berserkers, right?
Well, right, and
Exactly.
that's part of my thinking is like this is actually not a comp I've played a lot, right? So I really am relying somewhat on this guide here, and something that I would not normally do, that this guide wants me to do, is to roll at 6 pretty heavily.
Hmm.
And so I'm thinking like I want as much gold for that as possible.
Do you know the reason why you want to roll at 6 here?
I think it's kind of two-part in my mind. One is that Olaf 1 is strong now, like we talked about, so hitting one Olaf is a pretty big deal, and I'm hoping to do that. And two, I'm hoping to roll before other people, in part. Those are the things in my head, at least.
So Gunmei is a really good friend of mine, and I talk to him quite a bit. The main reason you want to roll down at level 6 when you're going berserkers is you want to pick up all of the berserkers on. You want to almost 2-star all of them. The Volibear, Mundo, Scion. You want to pick them all up. Renekton. If you haven't found a Renekton, having to roll and hoping you get a Renekton later on in the stages when you're level 7, level 8 is really hard to do.
Hard, yeah.
Yeah, and the other point is with berserkers, you really want to try and win streak, because the comp, if you're not hitting that Olaf 2, does fall off really hard and you start taking a lot of damage. So getting, playing for a win streak, getting your board as strong as possible at that level 6 stage to last you through all of stage 3. And one ways you can do that is by using a glacial transition, a 4 glacial transition with Israel, if you're not hitting those berserkers. So those are some of the reasons why why Gunmei likes to roll down at 6, and which a lot of people are doing now as well.
Right.
Do you prefer going for that glacial or electric or desert sort of synergies? Which synergies do you like valuing early on?
I honestly like, for sure glacial is the best, but
Mhm.
I'll just play whatever I'm rolling. This is
Okay.
where the flexibility comes in this mid-game transition. How flexible can you be with what you're rolling? But yeah, definitely Israel for glacial is the
Right,
strongest
right.
with Warwick.
Yeah, and I didn't play Ezreal there, because again, I'm thinking mostly about econ here. So I'm like, if I can get a 3-cost unit, I can sell out my bench and get to 30.
Yeah, this is where it's like a little bit of experience comes into play, and someone like Gunmei, has played these transitions so many times. He knows
Right.
all the units that he can go for.
Right. So as we're going into the next stage, not next stage, next
I
round.
actually didn't see what item you pick up there.
We grabbed a needlessly large rod.
Perfect.
Managed to make
I
a
like that.
gold. Yeah.
So that's maybe something that we can talk about. Also going into set 3, because it got removed, so I think it's good for people to know. In set 1 and 2, actually I don't remember if you could do this in set 1, but in set 2 for sure, you had the option to sell the carousel unit before it calculates interest.
They didn't have that, I think.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's new for set 2, right?
I believe so. I don't recall that being that one.
So the way you would do it is you would manipulate it by switching to your board and then hovering your mouse in the spot that your carousel unit would fall on, and quickly smashing the E button, the sell button, to sell that unit before it calculates interest. But they have removed that, and I think they give a very good reason for removing it, which is it wasn't that intuitive for new players to know about that. And so yeah, they just removed it. Also with mobile, it just makes coming out, it makes more sense.
Yeah.
Right. So,
It's like a hidden little trick.
Yeah, something I wanted to
Exactly.
ask real quick right here, and I'm just going to pause for 1 second. I'm at 38 gold. I remember playing this, and in my head, I was trying to figure out if I win that round, should I sell this Renekton to hit 40 gold?
So I know for a fact that Gunmei would not sell that, just because it's a really important unit.
Yeah.
But I think someone like Milk, Delicious Milk, he would sell the Renekton there for the econ. So that it comes a little bit to a difference in play style.
Sure. Yeah, I was just curious, kind of what your thoughts on that were, and I think it agreed. Like some people force harder for econ in the early game, whereas some people, prefer to hold those units and have
Right.
more guaranteed or more certain unit upgrades.
What would you do there, Nikki?
I personally would not sell it just because I value
Right.
hitting the unit more. I know Milk really likes the econ, and
Yeah.
that's just well known, but personally, I'm a bit scared because he isn't a 2 cost yet. So I don't want to be stuck with a unit that I might need to even sell off to get that item off of him.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. In my head, I'm just thinking like, Renekton's pretty good, but I'll still get Desert with Renekton 1 later. So it's like, was somewhat willing to sell him off, but fortunately for him and probably me.
I think something also to think about when you're at that, 1 gold off is look at overall how much gold you had. You were at 39, right?
38 there, but yeah.
So right. So going to, but if you're thinking about overall, you're at 30 gold in stage 2.5, which is really good. So you shouldn't be too sad about, that 1 gold.
Yeah, that is a good point.
You're gonna hit that 50 at the
Exactly.
We'll be
exactly.
58 Krugs, no problem. So
what do we have here?
I know. We've got
Who could that be?
got the mirror with the I don't know if it's the
Looks
better
like someone else is going the same build.
overall item, but you'll see I point out here he's got the Morellonomicon, which is almost definitely going to win this round for him.
Yeah, for sure. Nasus with
Yeah.
Morello early game is really, really strong.
And so, like, when you see something like this, how much do you start to consider pivoting off the comp you're forcing, or when do you start to consider pivoting off the comp you're forcing, if not when you see something?
So this is such a great question. It basically comes down to how many people can the build support. And for Berserkers, the answer is usually two, maximum 3. If you start seeing, 3 people going it, that's when you start asking yourself, maybe I need to pivot out. So it's going to depend from build to build, from comp to comp, and just having a really great understanding of how many players in the lobby can it support. Sometimes it's up to 4 players. So, you see 4 players and you're like, okay, I can still keep doing this. Sometimes it's only 2 players and you're like, okay, it's 2, it's fine. I can stay on my path. And yeah, so it just depends from build to build and become, ooh, what's this?
Who could that be?
So that's
Yeah,
a high roll. Yes, sir.
Another
Oh, yeah.
question I have is I don't know if you want to pause just for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, before that, you weren't seeming like you were hitting too many of the units naturally, but the other guy was hitting some on his board already. Would you typically tend to also switch off if do you base it on how many people are playing it, or do you base it on what you're getting in your shops? If that makes sense.
Usually you base it on gold, actually. If you have more gold than the other person going it, you're in a much better position, even if you don't have as many units that he's gotten together. So yeah, it's usually based on the gold. If you have a lot more gold, and then again, if you like, sometimes you just straight up have the confidence that you're gonna play it better than him, meaning that you're gonna roll at better intervals, you're gonna econ better than them, you're gonna transition better than them. So depending on how confident you are in the build, it doesn't really affect, seeing someone rolling the same units as you naturally.
Right. And if you're someone who plays the comp consistently, then you kind of understand that.
Exactly.
Okay. And do you want to talk about backlining versus frontlining berserkers?
There's actually, because I have seen the video ahead of time, there's a great example a little bit later on. But in general terms, early on, when there aren't that many units on the field, it's okay to use the Hexes to your advantage and to frontline all your berserkers. When it becomes more important to backline your berserkers is around that level 7 mark. And I guess we can talk about this a little bit. The reason you want to do that is berserkers, they splash and they have a chance of putting the glacial buff on them, meaning they stun units. And now if the berserkers are frontlined, the rangers are far enough, or ranged units are far enough away from the front line that splash cannot hit them. But if all of your berserkers are in the back line, what happens is the units in the very back row of your opponent's team will go to the first thing they see, which is the berserkers on the back line. But I think let's quickly look at this roll down here, and we can talk about that
right.
positioning after.
I'm rolling down a little bit slowly here. I haven't played a lot of berserkers recently, so
I can tell you're not experienced in the build by what you're picking up. You're hard tunneling on only picking up berserker units, whereas as you start playing the build more and more, you start also picking up transitional units like the Israel, the Warwick, the Braum, and that gives you options. You know, if you're not hitting the berserkers, then you can use those transitional units at this level 6 mark.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say I've played a fair amount of berserkers, but I haven't played them since like Glacial's been changed, and since Glacial's become a better option for them. So you're very right that I'm not specifically familiar with those transitions.
Yeah, and as I said, it just comes with experience.
Oh yeah.
And would you 2-star those units if you...
The Israel 100%. The Warwick, yes, because it's not, because it doesn't cost any interest.
Right.
The Braum also, honestly, the Braum is such a good unit, so yes, I would upgrade the Braum as well.
Okay, so for Glacial, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And then where would you start sort of pivoting off of that around at what point if you start hitting more of your 2-star units, or is there like a point in time where you...
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would transition as soon as I have all my other berserkers on the bench upgraded, and 1 Olaf, meaning I can get my 6 berserker synergy online. So as soon as I can get my 6 berserker synergy online with 5 berserkers fully upgraded, that's when I sell off the Israel, the Braum, the Warwick.
And does it bother you if you are losing that amount of gold, or do you think it's like an investment to sort of save health during that time?
Oh no, yeah, exactly. I think of it as an investment in keeping my health high.
Okay. And then as we're going to this carousel, what would you want to pick up?
I've actually have not been keeping track of what's on our bench. If you can maybe remind me quickly.
There was a tier and there was a bow, I believe.
So let's just hop back.
Yeah, that's great.
So because
okay, so we have a locket.
We have a locket. We have
a little bit back to see when the fight starts, so we can see the components that you have.
Let's see. There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, so I've got a bow on Olaf, and I've got a belt here on Renekton, and I'll just preface this all by saying I don't remember. This is like literally the worst carousel of my entire life. I don't recall what I have when I'm going into this carousel in terms of components either. And you'll see. But let's get to what you would select. What would we optimally for here?
So the way I think about it is you have the locket already, and you found an Olaf. So at this point, I would already start looking for Olaf items rather than trying to go for, the standard, I need 1 locket, 1 Zeeks. That's great if you can pick up that Zeeks early on. But because you've already found your Olaf and you've already built the locket, which is, the more important than the Zeeks, I would start already thinking, okay, Olaf items, what are those? RFC, Last Whisper, Guardian Angel. You have the bow on the Olaf already, so you're starting to look to pick up that glove for the Last Whisper, that bow for the RFC, or sword chest for Guardian Angel.
Right. So let's see what happens going into this carousel. It's a good one. So that much. I'm going to be second pick here. Third to last. There's no glove on the carousel, so I'm not going to be able to get that. The only bow is gone. So I'm looking for this sword here, and then I don't remember what I need.
This is actually this is a really good point to talk about, and it's something that takes practice. you
can't. I know I can't see the components on my units, and I can't remember what I have. But yeah,
it's It's all about habit building here, and the habit you need to build here is the stage before the carousel. List out 3 4 components that you want. So it's like, okay, first I'm going to look for sword, next I'm going to look for glove, next I'm going to look for bow. If none of those are available, I'm going to look for tier. Like, just make a list of 3 4 components that you want. Start building that habit, and it's going to help you in the long run.
Yeah, and I think in my mind I should have just gone for the chain vest there after the sword was gone.
Right.
Because sword or chain vest is going to go into GA. But I think going into that I was thinking like glove, bow, sword, because sword gives me like GA or Zeke's flexibility.
Right.
And then when I don't get any of those things, I don't have a list after that, and I can't exactly remember my components, which is a big mistake, but and leads to some kind of weird end game items, unfortunately. Case, but yeah.
What is
Okay,
your
you live and you learn.
What is your opinion on Hush?
Hush has definitely fallen off a little bit. It's like Hush, I would leave it as a last resort. If I can't make Hand of Justice, if I can't make the other 3 items that I mentioned, then yeah, I'll go with the Hush.
So if from that last carousel, would you have considered making a Hush from that cloak on the board, or just picking up something else and waiting to see what you get?
I would have gotten the chain vest there because I think Guardian Angel is the second most important item on the Olaf. So yeah.
Okay.
So now
and yeah, for a little bit, like I guess more on the Hush, those components I would rather use. Tier I would rather use for a Hand of Justice, and the cloak I would rather use for a Zephyr.
Right. And how much do you value desert synergy depending on the stage?
That's such an excellent question. So desert depends on the item that you have. If you have Last Whisper, you do not value desert. You do not need to play the Kha'Zix. You can run a second Olaf. That's what Gunmei likes to do. You can run the Karma. You can any good unit instead of that Kha'Zix. But if you can't, you're happening that you're not finding that Last Whisper, that's when you really have to value that desert synergy.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we'll see I think we'll see some more unfamiliarity on my part as we get a little bit later into this comp, where I'm not exactly sure where to go on that transition. And I think like when we talk about forcing comps, I talked a little bit earlier about like not building as broad a skill base necessarily. Like if you're trying to play everything, then you're learning a lot. But when
it honestly
playing...
just
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it honestly just comes down to people's preference and play styles as well. Some people like, coming up with stuff on the fly. That's how they have fun. Some people like playing the same thing every single game. So, there isn't a correct way like, oh, you should always force. Yes, some patches are good for it. Some patches are bad for it. But also keep in mind, what do you like to do as a player?
Yeah, and to my point, I was just saying, like, you build like a depth of familiarity with a single comp. You learn all these ins and outs, so it's not like you're not learning anything, right? Or you're still learning a skill, and that skill still translates.
Matchups. Yeah, exactly. You're learning matchups, right? Like, that's where you learn, like, okay, Berserkers are good into this. Oh, this comp beat me. Like, oh, that's good into Berserkers, and then that's when you can start, slowly learning how to play flexible by knowing all of your matchups.
Right. And it's also something to note, like all the guides that you see online is not a hard way of playing the game. Like you don't have to take those items and just do that. And if you don't, it's like over. There's so many different ways to get into this final sort of like force comp.
They are, after all, just guides. Take them as you will. If you like it, great. If not, feel free to take it as maybe a learning tool of how you can incorporate that into your own game,
right? And seeing what you like compared to what they're saying.
Exactly.
So would you have rolled down to 1 gold when you're at 7 trying to hit that Olaf 2?
So I actually, if you don't mind, want to look at that roll down again, because
let's take a look.
This is where a little bit of experience comes in terms of knowing your board strength. And I remember that, this was a really good point to talk about. You want to base how much you roll on how strong is your board.
Mhm.
So we're quickly, yeah, we'll take a look at this roll down here. Okay, let's pause here really quick before you do the roll down. So let's take into account what we have, right? We have the Mundo 2, Volibear 2, Kha'Zix 1, Olaf 1, Renekton 2. We do not have 6 Berserkers. So we need to go in this stage knowing like what's the minimum that we need to hit, right? To be able to last through stage 4. So this is where, knowing the comp and understanding what you need comes into play. For this in particular, I know that we need 6 Berserker synergy, and we usually want every Berserker upgraded, and then either Olaf upgraded or Kha'Zix upgraded. Having one of the 4 costs upgraded will be able to last you through all of stage 4. And then that's when, we're going to take a look at this roll down and see like where could you have stopped.
All right, let's get that started.
And when you're looking at the items on the side, do you prioritize some of the combinations?
It would probably just be like Warmogs and I don't know, maybe Morello, I think, on Mundo.
Okay. I'm just wondering, you know how some people don't want to make the Morellos too early, that kind of thing.
Right. So stage 4, that's actually, you guys are asking amazing questions today. What I like to do is I like to hold out on items until stage 4 though. Stage 4 is where you start taking a lot of damage. And this is where I'm like, okay, I need to commit the majority of my items. I can maybe hold on to one component if it's a really important component for like a piece I need. But by stage 4, I've usually committed almost all my items.
Okay. And do you think it's dire or maybe worrisome if there aren't super good Olaf items as you're seeing on like the board itself? I know.
No, I think at this point it's just do what you can to preserve health, because these stages are going to decide on if you're going to land in the top 4 or not.
Okay.
And so I paused here. This is where I've hit an upgraded Jax. I'm on 6 Berserkers now. I still don't have the Scion upgrade, and I don't have either Olaf or Kha'Zix upgraded.
So to answer the question you asked a while back, I would roll down to 0 here. And another reason being is 1, it doesn't meet the criteria that I listed. 2, you have 3 pairs that you can hit, Kha'Zix, Olaf, and Scion. So it's worth it to roll here for hitting one of those 3 pairs.
That was my thinking, is like, especially I've got Kha'Zix and Olaf paired. Like if I can hit one of those pairs, that's a pretty big upgrade. So I do sometimes though get towards the end of games, it can be like, how important is that upgrade and how much do you really lower down? So we'll see. I do roll down a little bit more here.
And at what point do you stop? Like after this round, you have no more gold. Do you try to build it back up and roll after carousel? Or like, what is your mentality here? Just roll every round until you get it?
Yeah, it's this is how you play it, and you have to accept it. It's you donkey roll until you hit your criteria. Yeah,
and sometimes that feels bad to me. I mean,
it does, but it's literally your only, like, think of it as it's your only option. You're doing the most optimal thing.
Exactly. Like some games, I mean, there's variance in this game, right? And so some games you're going to hit the stuff on the way down, and that's going to be,
feels good.
Yeah, a top 2 game for you,
and
or whatever.
Feels bad.
Right. And when it's a feels bad, you're just doing everything you can to feels a little bit better. Just to maybe get that top 4 out of it. I've got 3 belts, so I'm obviously not making Morello's, Zeke's, and something else. I don't really know what to do with that tier, so I make Redemption. I don't know what you think about that.
I think Redemption is fine. It's completely fine.
I feel like Berserkers are kind of a clumpy comp. They tend to, you can kind of get them in a position where a lot of them will get hit by Redemption. Not an ideal item, but
it's completely fine. And I think with your positioning here, I think I can finish up on the point before about the backline Berserkers. What happens, I remember I left off where the units in the back of the opposing team, because they target the first thing they see and your Berserkers are in the back, they actually walk up in range of that splash cone damage, giving you better odds of applying the glacial proc.
Yeah. And here I saw that you sold the poison. So where do you draw the line of, okay, I can play poison versus I can't? Because a lot of comps online like to list that as like a final comp for berserkers, for example.
So the poison, I'm glad you brought this up, but poison was actually good like maybe 2-3 patches ago.
Mhm.
And in this patch, I know again, all of this is because of Gunmei. He just doesn't play poison. You just play a
Mhm.
second Olaf, or you play Karma tethered, which is, I see you have the 2 Karmas on the bench there. And yeah, so it's completely fine that you're selling the poisons off there.
Yeah, I think I bought them because I thought they have been an option. They could be an option. I have Morello's on the bench if I want it, but then I just thought like I don't think I have enough gold to like
Mhm.
really get into that and also hit Olaf 2 and Scion 2.
Now, a quick note about, because we talked about the Last Whisper and Desert, right?
Mhm.
And in this case, you have them both. But at this stage of the game, you've already upgraded Kha'Zix. So please don't, I heard that if I have Last Whisper, I don't need to run Desert. You've upgraded the Kha'Zix, keep him in at this point. You've invested, the 12 gold. It'd be a waste to sell him at this point.
Exactly. Yeah, that was my thinking as well. Is like I know that it's not necessary, but Kha'Zix is a pretty good solo unit, I think. Just like you kind of
And it's a
yeah.
good carry for stage 4, right?
Yeah, so
definitely going to help.
And then I think I make a somewhat questionable decision here. Talk about for econ. I believe I end up selling one of.
I think it's also completely fine. Like your best level 8 would be just adding in another Olaf here.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if I'm undervaluing Karma 2, but my thought process was largely that Karma 1 is decent, sort of like.
Well, I think the way you think, the better way to think about this is, why am I holding on to these karmas when it's going to be such a long time before I hit level 8? You cannot play that karma until you're level 8.
Exactly.
And just econ up, right? Make sure you can have enough gold to hit level 8, and then you'll roll down for the karma when you're doing that.
Right.
So I think it is better off to sell here.
Yeah, it is kind of like a two-part thought, right? It's one, it's going to be a while before I can play Karma, and two, I think for me it was just that like Karma and Karma 2 both do the same thing. Even if Karma 2 does it a little bit better, you still like
sure
the kind of cost benefit of holding her and not getting, because what we'll see is that the unit I grab here, I'm on 17 gold and I want to get to 20. So I think I don't end up being able to.
And you're relatively healthy for how the game went.
Yeah, I mean, I think one that speaks to knowing like when you found a good guide in part, and like then doing your best to stick to that. I'm not playing the guide to a T or anything, but I've taken away some of the core concepts, and I'm going from there. And to like knowing what is an okay, like a decent comp in the meta, right? Like if you're playing a decent comp in the meta with a decent guide, then you should expect decent results. I think it'll.
Right. Nikki, what are you thinking for items here?
I am thinking a second locket, but that's personally me. Just because I feel like the Morello isn't going to be. Well, I would scout first and then I would see what the lobby is like. But I think the double locket would be good just because it'll give you time for that Olaf to go off at least. A little more health. And he doesn't have too many offensive items, so he's not going to just pop off. So hopefully, if he's going to go glacial, he can stun someone for a bit, that kind of thing.
So the way I like to think about it is, we're at a high enough health that if we take a few more damage these next 2 rounds, it's okay. And so that way I don't have to commit the locket right now, and I can hold for what, in my opinion, I think is a stronger item in the Guardian Angel. And I think if I didn't have one locket already, I would definitely slam this first one. But because I have one locket, I'm high health. I don't need to worry about these next 2 rounds. I can tank 2 rounds to see if I get a sword from Raptors and get that so important guardian angel on the Olaf.
So I know earlier you said that you would make the items going to stage 4. Is this a situation just because you're comfortable with your health and sort of judging from
So I would have made every single other item except the chain vest. I would have held
Okay,
on to
I
the
see,
chain
I
vest.
see.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So here's Raptors, where we'll get essentially our final item components and kind of see what we get out with. But you're saying you would have made what, a Warmogs already here?
Yeah, I would have slammed the Warmogs on the Mundo.
Yeah. I think I end up doing.
Even Morello is completely fine.
Yeah, I think we'll see what I end up doing, and it's exciting. I think
maybe we can pause here because there's something that I want to touch on, and that's I think this comes maybe with, again, I don't know the situation that you're in when you were playing this, but I think something that we can touch on is scouting. And I didn't see you doing much of that this game.
No, and to be honest, I was not paying the absolute most attention in this game, but I also don't scout enough, and it's something I'm always on myself about, is like, realistically, you can scout anytime there's downtime, right? Most people don't, but you could be, but I think I'm like even below that threshold. So
this is one of the things where scouting, you want to try to build it into a habit. And what I suggest to players to do is look at the timer. Every time it hits 5 seconds, so like when you have 5 seconds left to go on your turn, start tabbing through all of the boards. And it's usually enough time to go through all of the boards, just 1, 1, 1, 1 through all of the boards, and that gets your scouting done. The reason why Gunmei is so good at this this build, is because he scouts a lot. And something that's very important is, stuff like Zephyrs and stuff like your Olaf positioning. You have Olaf on a tile, which is a primary, Zephyr spot. And if any one of these boards had a Zephyr on that spot, your Olaf does no damage. Or on the Kha'Zix, you're going to be eating a lot of damage. So that's how he saves a lot of health or wins fights that he shouldn't be. And the other thing is key units that deal a lot of damage, like Kindred, strong rangers like Twitch. If your Olaf is on the edges, what those units like Rangers or Kindred will do is they'll focus the Olaf first, because he's like on the uttermost edge closest to them. And what you want to try and do is put them a little bit more towards the middle, or at least where they're not in directly opposite of those strong units like Kindred with Seraphs, Rabadons, or Twitch.
Yeah. I'll say, like, one thing that I feel like I do is I feel like I scout more in the late game, because I feel like I get more value out of it in the late game, because
For sure.
But better players actually have a better idea of what their matchups are going to be earlier in the game. They do a better job of tracking. Yeah, go ahead, because I'm curious about how that works exactly.
The way you do that is you're not like necessarily knowing who you're going to fight, but what you're doing is you're optimizing your board every single time against of what the strongest board is. So you're tabbing through, you check, okay, who's the strongest player right now? And then you position for them in case you get them. And then when you do get them, then you change your positioning for the next strongest person on the field. So you're always optimizing for, the worst like possible outcome of who you're going to fight. And once you hit them, you continue adjusting over and over.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because I know that it's my impression that there's some way to like keep a better track of who you've played and who you might possibly be playing based on who's playing each other, which you can kind of track in the mini map in the lower right.
Yeah, the other like most common way, and I do this one and get lucky with it. I don't know if it's luck. I think it's just keeping track, is who you haven't fought in a really long time.
Right.
As you're tapping through the boards, you kind of like remember like, oh, this build, I've never fought him in a while. He's probably going to be coming up soon, and lo and behold, it usually does. Just keeping a track of who you haven't fought in a very long time.
Yeah, but your first point was a really good point, in that if you're prepared for the strongest board,
exactly,
and then you just keep going down the line, that's like a way easier way to do that and extract value, which I hadn't thought of. and I do get in that mindset of like being lazy about early scouting, where it's like if I have a good idea of what people are playing in my lobby, I might not scout for a while because I'm just like, well, I don't really know who I'm going to play next, so I'm not really going to change positioning. But that's honestly just somewhat lazy, and the way that you've laid out to do that by positioning for the strongest player and then going down the line once you've played them positioning for the next strongest makes like a
Yeah.
really clear cut nice way. That's a really let's see what items we get. Get a sword.
Oh, get a sword.
I get to make GA, and then spoilers, I make 2 Morellonomicons. Not sure that was the best use of those items. What would you guys have done with these items?
Okay, so it's definitely Guardian Angel. We know that
Right.
on the Olaf. I guess we can watch the roll down here.
Mhm.
But from what I see here, then you have 2 rods, 2 belts. That's tough. It's either Rabadons and Warmogs, which you can just throw those on
Mhm.
Mundo. He scales really well with Warmogs and Rabadons. Otherwise, like you said, the double Morello, which isn't good, but at least it gives you some anti-heal, and sometimes you just really need that anti-heal, so you might as well go for it.
Yeah, and part of the reason I did that is like I don't like I know that Mundo scales with Morellonomicon, but I it's not something I've done before, I don't think, so I'm not sure like how good that's going to be. That's just something I'm very unfamiliar with, whereas I at least like know what I'm getting out of Morellonomicon, I feel like.
And as we're in the later stages, how would you think about positioning with berserkers?
Yeah, so
In
this is the
terms of
one. Yeah, the one thing that I don't like here is that Scion being up there. I would just go full backline, move everything one to the left, put Scion on the tile, and that way you're keeping Karma tethered to your Olaf. Sorry, was there like a second part to your question there? Maybe I didn't let
I
you
was just
finish up
like
on.
wondering, do you feel like or when I play berserkers, I'm often confused about what the difference is in moving like a Scion versus like a Jax, or do you think it's more
Ah,
important to focus on like just the position of the Olaf? Because I know that's a lot of units to move around at once.
so what you're thinking about with Scion and Jax
Mhm,
is they have a stun, and so you
mhm,
want them to hit as many people as possible. So
mhm,
usually the Scion is good somewhere towards the like where the Renekton is. That would be a good spot for the
mhm,
Scion. Or one of the when you're scouting one of the sides, because he can get like a side
mhm,
alting to the sides. So it depends on usually how people are positioned. And same with Jax, you want him to alt as many people as possible. And usually he's getting the most value somewhere in the middle of the board. So the Scion and the Jax, you're putting towards the middle. And then the Olaf, what you'll see good players do is they'll move the Olaf before every single fight.
mhm.
Why? Because other players are scouting for you and maybe trying to zephyr you.
Right. And would you value the mountain hex for that Kha'Zix, or would you put him somewhere else instead? Because I know he's like 1 hex up.
Yeah, so that tile is perfect for Kha'Zix.
Mhm.
Any tile that's in the second or third row, assassins are completely fine to go in. So I would keep that Kha'Zix there
Okay.
until the rest of the game, unless there's a specific scenario where I want Kha'Zix to jump left, but it's usually fine
Right.
keeping him on that tile.
Yeah, and not to make excuses, but I remember trying to figure out how I could get I think I was having some trouble
How to keep Karma tethered?
how to keep Karma tethered and keep Olaf in the locket, and I think I just kind of brain farted a little bit. Do we want to go back a second and just look at that
Sure,
carousel
sure.
and talk about what do we think good options are here? Um, I mean we just saw I end up taking Hand of Justice, but
Hmm.
what would you guys have taken here? Or do we want to go back and look at my items again real quick?
I'm
I
okay.
remember. Yeah.
Okay.
What would you have done here, Nikki?
I think I would have taken Hand of Justice. I mean, it's either that or IE. I
Yeah.
feel like there might be more value from the Hand of Justice depending on the healing on that.
I think
Right.
just because I think if I didn't have the Last Whisper here,
Mhm.
I would go for Hand of Justice. But because I have the Last Whisper,
It's better with the IE.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, you'll see here I figure out how positioning works.
There you go. There you go.
It was really, I mean,
Do you ever start getting worried now that you're on stage 5? Yeah, stage 5 with just a level 1 Olaf.
I'm terrified right now.
oh yeah, I mean,
If I didn't, yeah.
me too. You can see I
Good
sell
thing you hit
everything.
that. Yeah.
I'm doing everything I can to get
I would have
Olaf
been
2
donkey
here.
rolling all the stage 5 here to try and get that Olaf too.
Yeah.
I feel like as you're playing up the ranks as well, you're going to be more punished or you're going to get punished harder for making smaller mistakes like in the early game and also not getting that Olaf too early. So like right now it's fine, but I've definitely been punished a lot harder when I'm on stage 4 and I don't have Olaf 2. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think this kind of goes into as you were talking about, as you're getting into these higher ranked lobbies, it's getting harder. Not only are you getting more punished, but it also gets harder to force builds the higher in the ladder that you go. And the reason being is because everyone is really good as the better you get in Diamond, Challenger, and so on, at playing the strongest boards for the cheapest price. So you're always you're always being pressured. And what that means with forcing a build is at those Challenger lobbies, it kind of becomes you hit or you don't. Because you're being pressured, it's like you either hit your units or you don't. And that's where I would not advise, as you're getting higher in the ladder, I would try to stay away from forcing a build unless it's those bonker scenarios with 2 and 3 costs being absolutely broken, where it can support multiple people. The meta supports it. But yeah, as you get higher in the ladder, much harder to force.
Yeah, and speaking more specifically about like this patch itself, I know Electric was really highly first or last, that kind of comps. Do you feel like Berserkers is just a safer like are there different comps that are safer to force and that kind of thing, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I would say Berserker is a little bit more consistent than the Electric Zed first or eighth. It would give you, and again, if you practice, like you really practice it, really know the transitions, look up VODs from Gunmei, see how he's doing really well with it, and make sure you enjoy the play style as well. then yeah, you would be a lot more. This build would be a lot more consistent.
Right. And also another question, when you're playing these builds, do you typically see or what kind of transitions out of the comp do you see when you aren't hitting those units that you need?
Yeah, that's
I know it's like a really
that's a hard one. Yeah, that's a hard one. And basically, the way I'll talk about it is how much you've committed into the build. If you've upgraded your Jax, you've upgraded your Mundo, but you can't find anything else, you've kind of committed so much gold into it that you're locked in. Like we consider this, you're locked into the build, and it's, well, at this point, you're all in or nothing because it's going to cost you too much to transition out. It's going to be too difficult to look for too many other units. But there's some cases where a build that you're playing transitions really well into another build. And so it's okay if you've upgraded some units, just because the items they're using or their synergy could pivot really well into another comp. So it really does depend from build to build. Berserker, I would say, is one where you kind of get locked in once you've upgraded a few of them.
Right. I seen one game before where Nature was playing Berserkers and he couldn't hit Olaf, so he went for Desert. So that was kind of interesting.
Sorry, who?
Nature's?
Well, something about Nature's is he's like an amazing flex player.
Yeah.
He's like one of the best flex players out there right now. And so
that's why I was like,
yeah, he's really he'll pivot out of anything, whereas most people will say like it's really hard, but he's very experienced in that play style and enjoys doing it.
Yeah, and
so find your play style.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure. I just paused here real quick. I'm on 14 health. There's no one has that much health in the lobby. there's only one upgrade that I have, right? It's just Karma 3. I'm on like 22 gold if I sell out my bench. Are you just rolling for Karma 3 here, or Karma 2 rather, here, or hoping to somehow get to level 9?
With the health that you have, I'm not going. I'm not even thinking about level 9.
Right.
I'll just be rolling it down every turn. Karma 3 or a second Olaf.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I guess that would have been an option.
Would you ever run Mystics with your Berserkers or just the second Olaf?
Yes. So this is where you can scout the lobby to see if
Mhm.
Mystics is good, and make sure you get upgraded Mystics, and then you can cut the Kha'Zix because we have the Lost Whisper here.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, the other option is of course go 9 gem and
Hmm.
the Mystic, but you usually 9 is pretty hard to get in most games. So that's where the Last Whisper comes in so handy because it allows you to do something like adding in Mystics at level 8.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I will say I thought about Mystics here, but I mean, if I had hit a bunch of Mystics rolling down, I would have. I think that would be a tough call for me to take out Kha'Zix too, unless I had like 2 upgraded Mystics maybe. But definitely Mystics would have been good in this. I end up getting the light player, one of the 2 Lux players. You can kind of watch
I
how
think
this goes.
while we're on the topic of Mystics, it kind of I want to touch a little bit on like one specific item,
Hmm.
and that's the Assassin Spat. It's widely considered the best item on Olaf, outside of Last Whisper, outside of Guardian. Like, just the most standalone best item is the Assassin Spat. If you do have that on the Olaf, that's when you don't need to go Mystic, because you have backline access to those big carries like the Brand, the Rangers, the Lux, as you said, and you completely bypass needing to survive long. You just jump there, kill them quick, move on.
Yeah, so here I picked up the Mystic. I'm thinking about it, but I guess like my other thought was also that getting that Kha'Zix onto either of those might also be good. Potentially.
Yeah, again, I think for this one, I probably wouldn't do it unless it was upgraded Mystics.
I did though misplay and did not realize that actually.
So in the last 3, last 4, all it comes down to is positioning.
Right.
But he does have a U2. That's actually pretty scary.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's got U2. He's got.
Wait, that's a Shadow Lux too. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. The other guy's on 4 electric with electric
Yeah.
Lux too, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's not a great lobby for me to try to,
If you were planning a little bit ahead here, you would have prioritized, I think, Mystics a little bit higher.
Yes.
Just because it's really good into both of these players.
Yeah, exactly. Here though, I did not realize Kha'Zix would get hit by this Zephyr.
Not only is Kha'Zix getting hit by Zephyr, but your Olaf is going to be hitting a Bramble Vest unit.
Okay, so
your
yeah,
Olaf is going to be stuck
There you
hitting
go.
that Bramble Vest unit for a while before he can get into some key units here.
yeah. So there was a lot to be, I think, gained in positioning.
Yeah.
So kind of 2 big misplays in terms. I'm not feeling like I'm in great shape against either of those comps in either case, but
It's good to
be
try to
aware
play
of-
as optimally in
Exactly.
your positioning as you can.
Yeah. So that I get 3rd place. I get this weird up 3rd place screen, and so that's me playing a fairly unoptimized Berserkers. But like we said, check out Gunmei. I'll post a link to the guide in the video that I used, and Gunmei streams. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So check out Gunmei on Twitch. Solid Berserkers to lock down all of those optional sort of pivots and things in there that aren't just playing straight 6 Berserkers the whole time. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to add about this VOD or about forcing a comp or general life advice?
On my end, I think I've covered a lot of the stuff that I wanted to discuss. Overall, some really good points, some really good learnings from this video.
Yeah. As well, I got to ask everything that I wanted to ask. I mean, obviously, this is just one comp that you can play, but I think it's a good way of thinking about how to play, like Shadows, for example, and optimizing
Right.
that and seeing what fits with you, because maybe Berserkers isn't your playstyle, you know?
Yeah, here's something. Maybe before we move on, if you're watching this and you're looking to kind of make that end of season push, what could you be forcing? Like, what are some other comps that you might look for a guide to force if you're trying to push some rank here at the end of the season?
So, is that a question for me?
Yeah, for you, and then maybe we'll have Nikki follow up.
I kind of skipped out there. If I'm looking for a comp to force right now at the end of the season, okay, I think what I would advise for newer players, or someone just trying to push for that, push into plat, push into possibly diamond, Berserkers is an excellent one. And otherwise, I would say Shadows is your safest bet, one of those two right now.
And when you say Shadows, are we talking like 6 Shadow? Is that what we're trying to play?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, the 6 Shadow variation.
Yeah.
The Master Yi. Yeah.
Yeah, because for a while I know there was some like other Shadow stuff going around that was more 3 Shadow reliant.
Inferno Shadow.
Yeah, but I think more
Right.
recently it is that trying to hit that
The
Master
6.
Yi.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Is there anything you would advise, Nikki, or that you're liking right now that people might be able to force?
I personally prefer Shadows over Berserkers just because I feel like I'm a bit more flexible if I don't hit Olaf, for example, but that's just personally me because I like to play more flexibly. So,
Cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, I feel like that pretty much sums up everything we wanted to talk about in terms of forcing a comp there. So I think with that, we're gonna let Jinx get out of here and get some sleep as he's over on the East Coast there.
Yeah, thank
We're
you.
keeping him up super late. So thank you so much for being here with us.
My pleasure.
So thanks again to Jinx for coming on the show and just talking to us. Definitely check him out. He's a really great player. I remember looking at his guides in set one when I was, just learning the game. So definitely something that you should use as a resource. And we'll just jump back into what we normally do after reviewing a VOD, which is going over the patch notes for this patch 10.5. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do think it's important to sort of look at what has changed. And the biggest thing, things have been written down on the graphic that we've provided. Obviously, the buffs are electric and glacial are the most prominent ones. You're going to see a lot more Zeds, and especially with Glacial being stronger, a lot of people will tend to opt to switch to, or not switch, but use for Glacial, like Jinx was saying, maybe just making that Braum 2 and that Ezreal 2. And Electric, if you are able to high roll into it, not something you can hard force. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, to me, this patch has, and to be completely truthful, I haven't played a ton of games on it, but it seemed the last couple of patches, anyways, have seemed pretty similar with just like a lot of minor tweaks. I think, the team's pretty happy over it at Riot with where the balance is, and so it's just been a lot of minor tweaks. So a lot of the same comps are viable, it seems like, and a lot of the same units are still good.
Yeah, and in terms of nerfs, there were nerfs to Leona, Yasuo, and Karma, but I do still think that Yasuo comps are still viable to play if you get the right units and the right items. Karma obviously is still great, even though she got sort of like an adjustment, not really a nerf, but I am seeing a little less Lunar, but it is something that you can play early on, but definitely switch out of. And the reason why there are so many comps listed on the side is just because I think Riot is just happy with where the game is right now. They're sort of moving into set 3, and there's a lot of comps that you can play depending on the lobby and depending on what you're hitting. So a lot of it, again, is just what you want to play and get out of set 2 before it's over. So
Right. Yeah, and I think like we always say, like we're not here to do a real thorough patch rundown. Like 37 people have already done a great job of that. Go check them out if you really need some depth. But like just to give you an idea of like what some of these tweaks are, the Yasuo nerf is 5 more mana to cast his ult, so that's maybe 1 more auto, right? It might not even be in some situations. Very small stuff going on here, very minor tweaks where they're just pretty happy with the balance, but looking to get it just right as the set comes to a close here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we're talking about the end of set 2, we wanted to sort of end the show on talking about what we'll miss from set 2. And we'll just probably go one by one, depending on what we want to talk about, and we can like jump into each other's conversations. But I will just start off. Like, I think I'll definitely miss the most Zyra with Morello's. I know that was kind of annoying early on in the set, but I thought it was really fun to sort of be able to rely on a one cost unit, which you typically don't get to see. And you could sort of spread that Morello's damage everywhere. It wasn't as irritating as, for example, playing like a Void Sin comp with like a one cost unit, but I felt like it felt good to watch the Morello spread, basically.
Yeah, and I think part of that is that Zyra and Morello's was like an early game sort of thing for the most part, right? Like you were usually transitioning off Zyra into something like a brand later on, or you know, Nami or whoever else that would carry Morello's. So she wasn't there like in the end game, you know, still killing people. I guess in some games she would be, like early on she was strong enough that you'd still see her in end comps and stuff, but she wasn't overwhelming like some other units have been, while still like just being really strong and having that just be like, I mean, that was like I think pretty much everyone was looking for that, like early mid set 2 was like your start. If you got like the you know, Zyra 2 Morello start, like that was the start, right? So definitely iconic for the set. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, go. You can talk about.
I was just gonna say, yeah, for me, the thing I might miss the most is, I mean, a lot of the stuff I'm gonna miss is just stuff that's obviously very set specific, but I thought Lux was so cool. I liked her spell. I liked the mana she got on her spell, and just the fact that, you know, she'd just like zap your whole board sometimes.
Who was your favorite Lux?
My favorite Lux? I mean, I felt like the Shadow
Woodland?
Lux centered.
Woodland?
No, I as many times as I tried to play Woodland Lux, I actually never hit 6 Woodland. Maybe I should try to do that before the set's up, but
it's very underwhelming.
Yeah, I like Shadow Lux a lot. I mean, I think when you're talking like which, like, you know, she gets bonus damage on kill for Shadow, so you know, she'd be blowing up things even better. Get that guaranteed blowing things up, and then getting that more mana, and then blowing things up again more. But I just really like the fact that, like, that was so cool how, you know, variable she was, and the way you could deny other people a Lux, or, you know, once you got a Lux you were locked into it, so you really had to think, like, if you had a comp where your goal was just to play Lux, like, what Lux are you playing? If you get that early Woodland Lux, are you playing it, or do you just like roll for later Lux?
Yeah, and I know a lot of like European players played Lux comps where it was like they were relying on the Lux, whichever one they hit, to build a comp sort of around that. So that was interesting.
And I mean, for a while I did try to play like that just because I thought it was so fun. I didn't have great success like that, to be honest, but yeah, I was playing just like, there was a while where like Wardens felt really strong, and I was just playing like, you know, like Wardens, Mystics, and then hopefully a Lux, but also maybe, you know, a Singed or a Nami to carry some items or something like that, like just waiting for like that big late game unit that would spread around some damage.
Right.
Yeah,
and so the second biggest thing I'll miss from the set is the maps. I really enjoyed how creative Riot was in terms of using the maps as a utility and combining that with their IP. And it was really fun to sort of see the different comps that resulted out of that. For example, if you're on a cloud map, maybe you are less inclined to play auto heavy against like Nocturne. I mean, it's not going to stop you, but it was definitely something that you could throw in. And it is one of my critiques for Cloud not having as many units in that synergy. But I do think that it's really great to have something like Inferno or Ocean where you could get to that 6 synergy a lot earlier on if you weren't on that map, for example.
Yeah, and did you have a particular favorite map?
Yeah, I mean, I like all of them except for Cloud. Like, I just really dislike Cloud for some reason. But I definitely thought Mountain was really fun just because it opened a lot of early gameplay in terms of like a Mountain synergy if you're able to get lucky with the Kiana. So like, I'll see like a Kiana pop out from like the orb and be like super happy, and I would pick up Talia, for example, and it's just like fun to sort of build like perhaps like a mage comp with maybe I don't even play Kiana, but there's like the synergy going on between there. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that like the maps and having that extra decision making in the game, even if I think it wasn't necessarily like the map itself wasn't necessarily as impactful sometimes as was like the synergies that I think Kiana opened up sometimes.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's why I've got Kiana as like my sort of a thing that I'll miss a lot from the set is one, Kiana was just a heck of a unit. I mean,
Hmm.
uh as far as like AI for units goes, hers was I think, very impressive.
Right. Yeah.
Um and two, um the way that you could play different comps on different maps based on Kiana and have like I think especially early mountain with Kiana, which I mean we talked about some during the VOD, but like the way that she opened up early mountain was cool.
Hmm.
Being able to use her over some of the one cost units like Vlad or Diana at times to be in Ocean or um, Infernal was really cool, and I think just gonna miss that unit. I hope we get future units that even if they don't look, I think she's just like the ideal assassin unit in my mind.
Hmm.
Like what she does is strong but not overwhelming. It's reliable, which has been an issue I think in the past with assassins. So
Hmm.
gonna miss her.
And then jumping off of Assassins, I mean, I don't particularly think I will miss this, but I just think it's really fun when there are creative comps. I'm someone who really values like players getting creative with the units that they see. So, like Blender, for example, I've listed down here with the Nocturne. Like, how did someone come up with a spinning steel thing and then think, okay, this is the strongest comp in the game, and then play that for like 2 patches, even though they like nerfed it? I just think it's really impressive. So I'm going to miss that. I mean, I don't think it'll stop any players from being creative and coming up with their own thing, like egg roll, for example. But, it's something that I'll miss seeing in set two. And that's why sometimes I do wish that they do let us come back to the old sets to play.
Yeah, I mean that could definitely be a neat idea to play in the old
Hmm.
sets. I'll say like going forward though, Blade Master still in set 3, and furthermore, um, Blade Master Spatula still in set 3.
Hmm.
So, who's gonna be the new like? I'm pretty sure they've got Blade Master tuned down
Something,
enough, but
yeah.
I'm still looking.
Right.
I'm just like, who can I put this Blade Master spatula on and completely break? And I feel like
Mhm.
the obvious answer is Jin, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I haven't actually played that. I haven't played. For me, I think like just having played some set 3, I haven't seen any 9 unit synergies. I don't think they exist in set 3 right now. I think you could get to 9 of a unit with a spatula for some of them, but I don't think it's going to be easy, and I don't think there is a synergy for it. So I'm gonna miss that because that's like a fun thing to chase
Mhm.
sometimes. Like if you're just goofing around, you got some Inferno units, you hit an Inferno Lux, you're on like 7 Inferno now, and you're just like, I don't know, maybe I could get to 9. Maybe
You're
9
just
would be
like, I'm
fun.
how can I jam this in?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think just like having that is like a dream, sort of, uh, is nice and makes the game fun and funny at times.
Mhm.
Which like when you're playing a lot of games trying to like grind up the ladder, I think you need
Some pleasure out of it.
yeah, you need like some goofy stuff to happen to be like,
Yeah.
okay, that was fun. That like reinvigorates me, makes me want to play a little more, reminds me like the kind of stuff that got me into the game in the first place. And so while I understand that like 9-unit synergies are like mostly unattainable, and you know, they are hard to be strong because you're losing out on like defensive synergies and other synergies to get them, in a lot of cases, like I am gonna miss having those.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, just a lot of missing sets is just missing the units in the set. Like my last thing that I'll miss from set 2 is Zed. I mean, I don't play him a lot, but I just feel like in the patches where he's really strong, it's really satisfying when you're able to hit like Zed with perfect items and with electric, for example. And I feel like a lot of the fun that I have playing the game is scaling and getting to a later point in the game where I feel like, oh my gosh, like how was I this creative, or how did I get to this point, and just getting that first and rely on like positioning, for example, and just really tackling down on little things as you're later down in the game. And I feel like Zed is a really good example of that. And while sometimes he is overtuned or undertuned, I do think that he is a fun unit overall in terms of the set.
Yeah. No, Zed was one of my favorites. I liked when early Zed was a little bit busted, and
There were like 40 Zeds.
yeah, there'd be like 40 Zeds,
Yeah.
and they were strong. I think I played like, I mean, I hit Zed 3 in a game one time. It was actually a game I was playing with some I was watching a newer player to the game who was streaming, and she was doing some custom lobbies with her viewers, and so it was like a pretty low ranked lobby, so I felt a little bit bad about it. But how are you not going to take Zed 3? It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Just yeah, a hilarious thing. And I think back to, what was that, the mid-season invitational or all stars, was it, where they did the TFT tournament, and there was that, I don't know if you saw it, but there was that play where there was like the, was it Sivir with like Hand of Justice versus like all the Zeds on the board, but Sivir was kind of like cornered, and she still got through like an army of Zeds, and you're just like, but there were still so many Zeds. It was just hilarious. Like no other unit has had
could
that
do something that strange and like,
yeah, there's not been that option for something like that iconic sort of out of a unit in a while. So really cool. And then if I'm being honest, I don't actually know what symbol that is. Is that the ocean symbol? Because I think it's ocean that I like.
It's ocean.
It's just different than the ocean symbol on the other one. Oh no, yeah, it's different. That's fine though. I couldn't remember.
I thought it was the same.
No, I could.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But I just couldn't remember. I was like, I'm pretty sure I like ocean because I did a lot. I just going back to like auto chess, I've always thought that like stuff that, because the first thing I think of when I think, okay, this unit or these units or this synergy or whatever generates mana, do you think of like mage type stuff, right? But I mean, it generates mana for everyone. So like ocean is making more Zeds, you know, ocean is getting your defensive units to get their abilities off faster so that they live longer. Like I like having that option in a set. It exists in set 3 in some ways, but not outright like everyone gets mana for just existing on a, you know, timer like ocean was. And I think that's a great versatile way. I think the fun thing about the game is when units get abilities off and cool stuff happens, and I think ocean, you know, gives more units more abilities, and I think it's fun.
Yeah, and like early ocean mages really sort of defined the set. I mean, like it's been 3 months, but it just feels like I remember when that was still super popular. So
yeah, and I think I did a lot of climbing during that. It was just so straightforward. Like if you had good econ, basically, you could play ocean mage pretty well, and you know, halfway decent positioning, you're playing ocean mage. So yeah, so I think that'll about wrap up everything for that. Let me just get to our outro here. Was there anything you wanted to say before we got out of here?
I mean, before we get out, I just really want to thank again Jinx for coming on the show tonight and talking with us. You know, it was a great opportunity. It was sort of stemmed from last week when we were talking to Inflaria and he recommended Jinx to us. And it's really great to see the TFT community and basically be how tight knit as it is. And I think it's really great because there are a lot of resources out there, and a lot of people are down to help you learn and um, grow as the game grows. And even now, like, we're not like, Jinx is taking the time to talk to us, and I think that's really great. And I've learned a lot, even though I, watch TFT so much and like read so much TFT. But like, there's always something to learn from this game, and so definitely check him out on Twitch, and definitely check him out on YouTube. He's going to be putting out 2 episodes or 2 videos every week, so definitely a lot of content from that. And as you're going into set 3, that's something you should definitely take into consideration as you're learning the game, because it's kind of like a fresh start, right?
Yeah, and I believe Jinx is like going into doing like full-time content creation now.
Hmm.
If I caught right from his Twitter. And so you can catch him on YouTube. He's Jinx JK on both YouTube and on Twitch. And I'll include links to his YouTube page as well as to his Twitch page, so that we'll have those. And just to reiterate, like, if players as amazing as Nikki and myself can learn things, I mean, we've seen on video twice now how amazing at this game I am. If we can learn things from Jinx, so can you. Obviously, think of how much he could teach you.
Yeah,
No, but genuinely, like, his guides, his videos are great.
incredible.
Yeah, he did one way back, like pretty early in the set when some things were becoming sort of overwhelmingly popular on like counters, which is not a guide
Mhm.
I'd seen before. Like, most people are talking about how to play those things, and he's out there, telling us how to deal with people playing those things in our lobby, which I thought was awesome. So he's somebody I've been aware of for a long time, and I think a lot of people are aware of. So super, super cool of him to come on and hang out with us and dish some knowledge.
Yeah, so make sure to subscribe, follow him on everything. He's
Do
going
all
to
that
be
stuff. Yeah.
making a lot of great content, and we'll definitely be watching too. So if you like
Yeah.
us, you'll definitely like him. So
Yeah. And thanks as always to Roll Music for their song "The Pirate Dancer," which we used in our intro. I can't say the C sound today. Dancer, pirate, and the dancer.
Yeah, dancer.
We're at discord.me/top8podcast. We're also Top 8 Podcast on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Anything else before we get out of here, Nikki?
I think just enjoy set 2 while it lasts. Set 3's coming, so it's gonna be great. It's gonna be a little different from last set in terms of climbing ranks. So think of it as a new start and a new learning opportunity. And yeah, thanks for watching today.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Yeah, see ya. Bye.